Remnants of a Forgotten Past by Alban 55, Chapter 13, Infiltrating Ark Manor. Some excess sand fell off of Garo's sand shield, which was currently raised up and active, having blocked several shots from the dust rifle hidden in Roman's cane. Both fighters were unscathed, Roman failing to put a dent in Garo, and Garo refusing to attack back. He thought Junior would have actually minded, but he was supposed to be doing a job for the criminal. Roman's face was twisted in anger, but the grip on his weapon was getting increasingly less firm as it threatened to clatter from his grip, and his body language gave off the impression that he was worried. "What the hell is this?" he asked, no doubt referring to the sand that surrounded Garo's body and protected him from all harm. Garo even had the gall to sit down, all while Roman continued to do his damnedest to try and break through the sand barrier. Eventually, he began whacking his cane against the sand shield repeatedly as he gave grunts of exertion, hitting it over and over again like some kind of angry wind-up doll. Garo would give Torchwick one thing: he at least had the stamina when compared to the other low-level thugs and civilians Garo had seen throughout his life, but nothing Torchwick could do would penetrate his barrier. "Are you done?" Roman dropped his cane, his limited human stamina apparently finally kicking in. "You are a mess. I've seen your type of criminal back home. We call them sansoku. They are low intelligence, brutish use force to get what they want and never think more than one step ahead. It's why they are considered more a nuisance than an actual threat as far as my national military goes. At least your assistant must be as good as you claim her to be. I don't understand how you haven't been arrested or killed when you're not working for someone else that's willing to give you orders." That seemed to get yet another rise out of Roman, who clenched his cane and gave it one final crack against Garo's head, which the shield, always on cue, managed to block. "Exactly my point. Let me explain something to you since your idiotic brain is failing to comprehend this basic fact," Garo began. "This is a rescue mission. There's no need to go to the lengths that you're proposing. If you or anyone you hire has any skill in infiltration, subterfuge, and stealth, then it should be possible to achieve this mission without the use of blunt force. An excessive amount of dust is unnecessary." When he said this, Garo could finally see the gears begin to turn in Roman's head, and his arm slumped as he dropped his cane back into its initial resting position. If we go it this way, it will be far less risk and worth. You wouldn't need any more men or dust, but we would have to avoid fighting and remain undetected during the entire process." The tone Garo was taking brooked no argument, and the resistance was starting to drain from Roman. How had he gone from the one who was hiring Junior to having his terms dictated to him? "My assistant is my everything." Roman placed a hand over his chest. "This better work. You better know what you're talking about, and we better be able to recover her." Roman put his weapon away and dusted off his clothes in a vain attempt to look as sharp-dressed as he usually was. They couldn't afford to waste any time bickering. "We can go straight to the source this way. Tell me everything you know about the individuals who captured your assistant." Of all the people that could have captured Neo, it had to be them. Every criminal in Vale knows their names. They are the boogeymen of the criminal underground, or boogie woman, I should say. They are the tale that the mob boss would tell his precious little daughter when she goes to sleep at night to keep her from misbehaving. Very well. It seems they have quite the status in this country. Tell me more about certain individuals in the family. What would they want with your associate, and where would they even be keeping her? Roman's mouth opened, but no words came out as the thought died on his lips. He seemed almost uncomfortable with the idea and the question that Garo was asking him. "Well, it's probably like this." The town of Ruin in Vale was relatively backwoods, not existing outside the kingdom, but not too far inside its walls, with not a lot surrounding it. It was known for only one thing: the old noble family that had its manor located just outside the village. The Ark family was one of the oldest and most renowned families in Vale. Said renown came from the fact that no one in the kingdom's history had put more criminals behind bars, or in graves, for that matter. Some would say that the Arks got a little bit too zealous in their happenings. Their dogma was what they became known for above all else, similar to the Winchester's racism that only applied to the females and the family. However, the Ark family was matriarchal, head of household, being passed on from mother to daughter. Daughters were trained to become knights in the service of Vale. Sons were not allowed to have any knowledge of family techniques passed to them, and were forbidden to even study combat until they came of age, in which they could forge their own path. The current iteration of the Ark family was already strong, with plenty of more untapped potential. The current matriarch was in the process of molding her 7 daughters into becoming strong warriors. There was even rumor in the village of one Ark brother existing in the midst of all the females, though with family rules he likely wasn't allowed to participate anyway. The manor was quiet that night, with the groundskeeper already turning in for the night and leaving the grounds unattended to. When it came to the manor itself, the windows were dark and the house was still. The bush near the edge of their property rustled slightly, unnoticed by all as Tochwick's head poked out of the underbrush, and he surveyed the land with a smug smirk on his face. "Get down," Gara droned, sighing at the fact that Roman would expose himself so easily and early. He was dressed too flamboyant for this type of mission regardless. "Third eye, what are you doing?" "Silence, let me concentrate," Gar said as he covered his left eye and closed his right. Somewhere outside their vantage point and much closer to the manor itself, the Eye of Sand conjured itself up, floating as high as the second floor of the Ark Manor. The disembodied eye moved along with the low breeze, strafing up and down as it peered into every window it could, trying to catch a glimpse of what things were like for the interior of the manor. The house was dark in every room, understandable considering how late at night it actually was. The most that his third eye could see was silhouettes in the various rooms that they traveled by, but on the far side of the mansion there was a cellar door. Gara's face molded into a taut frown. Having gained very little information by creating that third eye and sending it out first, he dispelled the jutsu and opened his real eyes yet again. "I can't see anything inside. The whole manor has its lights out, so it looks like we'll have to infiltrate the hard way. Are you aware of any extra security measures this family may have set up?" Roman scoffed. "There's no way I would know anything about that, but one of their daughters has probably rigged something or other around the property. They might even know we're here already. If what you say is true about your assistant, then this manor probably has holding cells or a dungeon of sorts where individuals can be held in captivity. That type of place they probably want to keep away from their surface activities at best and completely away from the public eye at worst, even if you claim they have permission from the Vale government to perform such actions. My estimated guess is that these type of activities are preferred in a basement type area underground underneath the property. It is away from the public eye and also provides enough space. The only issue now would be finding this theoretical bunker." Gar poked his head out of the bushes, and cork on his gourd popping off, sand began to gather around his feet, forming a sort of platform that he could use to practically levitate. Roman looked at it, his lips pursed as if he had eaten a lemon. He seemed to be decided on whether or not he should comment on that, but having already seen Gara's shield, decided against it. "Hold on, let me get on," Roman said, seeming to figure out what Gar's plan to use the platform was for. He scrambled onto the sand platform clumsily, Gar looking on him with disapproval. "This would be a lot easier if you stayed here and let me do the work," Gar said. Roman's very technical status as his current employer, the only thing preventing him from straight up booting him off his ride. "No, if we're going to rescue Neil, I'm going to be there for it," the career criminal yelled back at Gara. Sighing, Gar commanded the sand to move them through the air, getting closer and closer to the mansion. "He's going to get us caught," Gar thought to himself, thinking about how once they got in there was no way the boisterous criminal was going to be able to keep himself from being detected. Gar brought them to the ground near their destination, that cellar door he had picked up with his third eye. The excess sand pulled by Roman and Gar's feet as he dispelled the jutsu, the sand flowing back into his gourd as the jinchuriki approached the cellar door. "Aha! A cellar!" Gara rolled his eyes at Roman. Was he going to point out the obvious this entire mission? Gara pulled the handle, unsurprised when the double doors failed to budge. Not deterred, Gara willed some more sand to flow from his gourd, speaking to Roman as he did so. "This girl, this rogue, she is the one who believes has the custody of your assistant?" he asked, starting up a conversation to get Roman to casually reveal more information. "Yeah, probably. That girl is only 9 years old, and she's already one of the top scientific geniuses in the kingdom. The horror stories from the underworld we can tell you about that one. She's never at the front line, but she's often the final destination for all the career criminals her sisters take capture. If she needs a subject, the government provides in the form of captured criminals." Gara began to gather the sand around the wood of the cellar door, working it between the cracks and crushing and eroding the material under a good-sized hole formed in the door. He reached a hand through the hole and unlocked it from the other side, swinging the cellar door open as Torchwick jumped back. The abyss beckoned them inside, but the darkness was palpable, so pitch black neither of them could see a thing into the basement. Gar descended into the darkness without a second thought, but Roman was a bit more tentative as he hunched over, insecure about himself as he followed Gar into the basement. Gara brushed up against something wooden in the darkness. As his eyes began to adjust, he placed a hand on the old wood, feeling the texture before it realized it appeared to be a wine barrel. We seem to have found their wine cellar, but the bigger question: does this cellar actually lead to the house? Gar asked, as if to answer his question. Toshvik adjusted eyes were training on an old wooden staircase of sorts that led up. Well, would you look at that? They left their cellar so easily penetrable, and it leads right up to their house. I wonder how this family has survived so long. They must have a number of people that want to keep them out. Roman chuckled, walking up the staircase to the wooden door at the end. Gar was just about to stop him from opening the door, but Roman had already turned the handle by the time he did so. The door creaked open, but Roman didn't notice the infrared sensor beam directly at his feet. He didn't even need to take a step to trigger it, however, because as soon as the wood from the door passed over it, a blaring alarm sounded from speakers placed elsewhere in the house. Roman yelped in surprise from the sudden noise, his cane flying from his hand as he lost his grip on it. His right foot pivoted backwards, meeting nothing but air as his misplaced footing made the young criminal fall painfully down the wooden steps. All the while, the alarms continued to blare for a few more seconds before they went silent, but that was hardly of any comfort to the two invaders, as the noise would have more than served its purpose. The house fell quiet for a split second with the alarms no longer blaring, but soon Gar was able to hear muffled voices coming from beyond the walls, sounding like they were coming from up at least one step upstairs. A tendril of sand shot out of Gara's gourd, wrapping itself around Roman and pulling him back to Gara's side. With the other redhead in tow and the plan in place implicated, Gara prepared to turn around, only for the cellar door they had come through get sealed off by metal shutter. They had come down from around the wood. Roman groaned, blearily getting to his feet after falling back into the cellar. He pushed some barrels that he had toppled into out of the way and shook some dust off himself, but his face lit up in pure panic. Oh no, no, he rambled, just now noticing the steel shutter that blocked the way out of the cellar. Surprisingly enough, another shutter over the door leading to the manor would have sealed them off in the room, but that didn't happen. The two of them found out why very quickly. The moonlight in the house peeking through the open door was giving them a little bit of illumination in the basement, but the shadow soon fell over them that wasn't entirely humanoid. The first thing that Gar noticed was that it almost looked like an oversized tin can on legs. It stood in the doorway, its singular red eye strafing over the room before locking itself on the two intruders. Damn, they have a security robot. This must be the work of Sienna Ark. Who? Gar asked. Sienna Ark. She's just as smart as her sister, but she specializes in the field of mechanicals and robots. She's still only 10 years old, though, probably why this thing looks like something from a cartoon. The red eye finally focused itself on Roman, but Gar's eyes widened as the sound of mechanical wiring gave way to twin guns opening up on either side of its head. Gar acted quickly, grabbing Roman in a sheath of sand and pulling him away into the shadows as thin laser sliced one of the wine barrels that was directly behind Roman into perfect pieces. Red wine spilled all over the floor, but the robot was already looking around again to require its targets. Gara acted quickly, casting a shroud of sand over Roman and himself before he noticed the robot was gathering its data based on that large red sensor eye. While he shielded both of them with sand, he sent out a tiny stream of the substance over just a few grains wide. Before the central bot could redetect their whereabouts, Gar had already forced some of the grains in between the joints of the robot, particularly on the apparent laser cannons that he had mounted by its head. There was no boom, no wires of gears, but there was a small, repetitive clicking noise from within the machine, as whatever Gar had done seemed to have jammed the mechanisms that allowed it to use that particular weapon. Gar responded next with a wave of sand, wrapping the robot in his signature move and crushing it down into its original metal parts. He let go of the remains, watching as the metal clawed down the stairs. There's bound to be more of them, and that alarm must have woken up the whole house, Roman shouted. Gar glanced behind himself one final time. They had been shut off from their entrance, which meant that they would have to find another way out. The mission they were on had been compromised almost immediately by Roman's stupidity. All that mattered now was trying to evade capture. The former Suna ninja was already making his way up the stairs. It wouldn't do good to get cornered in the small and cramped basement by more than one sentry bot or worse, the Arks themselves. Hey, what up? Roman cried, scrambling to follow Gara. The old staircase creaked underneath their combined weight. They avoided the step on the sensor beam. This time, Roman methodically stepping over the red laser and onto the polished wooden floor on the ground level. Gara immediately moved to hang a right, noting the narrow hallways they were currently on. All around him seemed to be a multitude of storage rooms, unless the Arks all lived in this cramped part of the mansion, which seemed unlikely. But now that Gar was out, they didn't need to look for an exit. The wine cellar had been blocked off with those metal shutters, but now he could just erode away the stone surrounding them with his sand and make their escape. We're getting out of here, Gar muttered as Roman came out of the cellar on his rear. But what about my assistant? You tripped the security system, and our job just became several times more difficult with the Arks awake and looking for intruders. Do you fancy getting killed here? They'll be on high alert, but we can come back later when they aren't looking for us. Roman walked up to Gara and grabbed the scruff of his shirt, which neither the sand nor Gara attempted to stop him. We don't have time for that. We need to find Neon now, before they end up doing something worse to her in the meantime. Roman shouted. Gar had to admit the criminal had a point. There was no telling what sort of time frame they were working with on this rescue mission. For all they knew, his assistant could have already fell prey to the mechanisms of those hideous experiments Roman had told him about. I hear talking from down this way, a voice shouted to someone or something else. The two intruders heard what sounded like mechanical wheels moving across the floor, and the voice that spoke was of a girl's, a very young girl's. Roman froze up at probably the worst possible time, because Gara was ready to tear a hole in the wall and get them out of here, but the voice was coming from behind them in the opposite direction and around a corner, and as Gara glanced backwards, he could see two shadows cast against the walls and getting bigger. There was no more time. Roman just stood there stock still, but Gara prepared for confrontation, but not before he raised his hands into a seal. Hinge, he muttered to himself. A puff of smoke later, and he was standing there as his deceased father, without the Kazukage garb, of course. It wouldn't do to have his face be plastered all over a wanted poster if he was going to live in the world. He elbowed Roman in the side, breaking the other redhead out of his stupor as the first of the Ark daughters rounded the corner with something in tow with her. Naruto left the inn after staying just one night, and what followed was several weeks of walking through the forests and swamps of Anima. They never stayed long in one place, camping in the safest of driest places they could find, and then moving on the next day. After a couple of weeks of this type of travel, the three of them settled down in the best place they could find as usual. They set up their campsite and went to rest, taking turns watching their four bandits or Grim while the other two slept. If it was the middle of the night when Neptune rustled himself up from his seat where he was watching and made his way over to Arslan's sleeping bag, he nudged her lightly, stealing glances at Naruto every once in a while to make sure he wouldn't wake up. The lone female of the group groaned in annoyance as she was roused from her sleep, tossing and turning a bit before she opened her bloodshot eyes to gaze upon Neptune. What? She asked, surprise leaking into her voice when she realized it was still very dark out and that it wasn't Naruto who was watching her. Is it my turn to watch over the campsite? Neptune raised a finger to his lips, shushing Arslan down as his eyes moved to where Naruto was fast asleep. What? She asked again, this time a bit sharper. We need to talk when he can't listen on us. Naruto didn't stir, but Neptune couldn't be sure that he wasn't listening on them. Wide awake, it was honestly rather eerie. What do you mean? I wanted to talk to you about this. Does it feel right to you? And I'm talking about you personally. Does it feel right to go with Naruto? He asked, as Arslan sat up in her sleeping bag. Apparently, she hadn't been the only one who could feel the cloud of doubt that was hanging over their group. She had tried to keep it to herself, but Neptune had noticed something. So much has happened recently, and it's happened because Naruto crash-landed into our lives. I'm better off following him to Mistral. I know that right now that for me, the events that happened are a blessing. I doubt we can say the same about you. Arslan began fiddling with a piece of her blonde mane. Look, I'm still really shaken about what happened. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to get to Mistral and put this all behind us. You don't seem all that comfortable around Naruto, Neptune pointed out. Arslan slumped when he pointed that out, resting her head against her hands as she let out a sigh. It's really that obvious. It's just, he seems nice, but all the stuff happened, and there's just something that's so off about him. I don't blame you. We know he attracts the Grim big time, though we don't know why that is. I've never heard of a single human being such a magnet for the Grim, and the way he fights too. I've never seen anything like it. It's definitely not like a huntsman, nor is it mundane enough to be something like a village warrior or hunter. Are you sure? I've never really gone outside my village before, so I've never seen a huntsman fight in person. Yeah, I'm sure. He doesn't fight like a huntsman. That clone thing he does is probably his semblance, but the way he fights isn't really the big issue here. The whole Grim Magnet thing is. We're getting closer to Mistral. No Groom will be able to penetrate the kingdom's walls, but the longer we travel with Naruto out here in the wilds, the more we put ourselves at risk. I've never been under attack by so many Grimm in my life, even when working at the circus. Neptune paused for a moment. I wouldn't blame you if it turns out you can't trust him yet. His intentions seem good, but I don't know. He's really the only way for me to get into a huntsman's school, though, so I'm going to keep traveling with him. Maybe we'll come to trust him completely in time. But you don't really have a reason to be traveling with us or even trust him at all. No, but I have nowhere else to go. Across from where the two were holding the conversation, Naruto had his back turned. His eyes were wide open. He blinked once, a neutral expression on his face as he rolled over and shut his eyes once again. End of chapter 13.